Hey there, I'm Chroma, and welcome to part 11 of Making an Abstract Adventure. Welcome back. This time we finished the last of our circle character's abilities, and with that we now have a shield block reflect ability. So, starting off, going into play mode, showing how it's working at the moment. So if we hold the E key, we have this shield here, and if we use the I, J, K, and L keys, then we can aim it in any direction, in a similar manner to how we had our arrows. So yeah, so we can aim it in any direction, and at the moment it doesn't have a lot of functionality, but eventually when we have like projectiles or maybe lasers or something, they will be able to be reflected off of this shield. So yeah, we have that now. So going into how it's actually working, we have this circle reflect script that has a rotation smoothing and a reference to a shield prefab that we'll look at in a second, which a lot of the coding here works similar to the player lineup script, as we'll see momentarily. But so then we have this shield prefab over here that is hidden below the stage over with our arrows, and basically it is an empty game object which then as a child has this green square or rectangle, which eventually will have better art, but this is more or less like the hitbox for it, similar to with our attacks, how they have the these red squares going around their actual like hitbox area. And then yeah, so by rotating this shield, it kind of pivots around a center point, by the center point being like where our player is when it's actually being used. And then it has a box collider 2D that's not set to is set like as an actual collider, but is on the no player collision layer that we made before that won't collide with the player. And yeah, and then also has this reflect tag, and those two things will be used by other objects that hit this shield to get reflected in different directions and whatnot. So yeah, that's how that is working. So going into the actual code behind all of this. So starting off, we have these two public variables that we looked at in the inspector. Then two private, hidden in inspector but public variables to be accessed by other scripts. One called shielding of a boolean of whether or not we are currently shielding, and then another boolean for whether or not to disable shielding, which at the moment this isn't really getting used, but it's kind of a temporary thing to if something else disables the ability for us to shield. And then we have a bunch of private variables here, one for the rotation of the shield, then getting references to a bunch of scripts: player move, jump, double jump, and player lineup scripts. One thing I didn't mention is that when we are shielding, we can't move. Just to make it, just for gameplay reasons, I've decided that like when we're shielding, we like can't move or jump. We have to be like in place, so you don't just, I guess, constantly have the shield being held out. Also with the shield button being on the E key, which there wasn't really a better place to put it. The other keys are kind of being taken up by other abilities, and having to hold down the E key while then also trying to use WASD doesn't work as well. And then also in the context of then a controller, holding down that many keys at once might just be tricky to be able to do. So we're just, as a gameplay choice, disabling the ability to move and jump and all that stuff while we're holding out the shield. So then there's more maybe puzzle stuff to it, of having to actually like get in position, then hold it out. Yeah, or if you're trying to like block a I don't know, something flying at you, then you're not just always holding down the shield and then running around. You have to like hold it out at the right time, basically. Gameplay decisions like that. So we're getting a reference to all four of these scripts to disable certain things on all of them. But anyways, then in our start function, we're starting off by setting the shield to false, or like to not be active, even though it's hidden under the stage, but just to be on the safe side, I guess. So then we're getting the actual references to all of these scripts, and then we'll get to this in a second. Well, actually, no. Basically, this is a public function called disable shield that can be called by, in this case, mainly our circle main script, to disable the shield. If we like switch characters and whatnot, we don't have to have the shield always. Like the shield doesn't like stay out. Same thing with that we did with our arrows. So basically, it just turns the shield off, and then also the shield variable, shielding boolean of whether or not we are shielding gets set to false automatically. Then we have this public function called reflect that, as we've already seen many times over in our circle main script, we have another reference to the circle reflect script, and then getting the reference in awake, and then calling it in update in this script, as we've done with everything else. So yeah, it's the equivalent of running this in update, just so that everything's running in an order that we want it to. Anyway, so then first we're testing if we haven't disabled the ability to shield, and if we've pressed the E key, as we've just looked at, if we press that button, then we want to be shielding and then moving the shield in the direction that we want to move it in. So then this is basically the same calculation that we looked at before with the lineup arrows of if we're hitting, so I, K, L, and J, we're basically then just setting this rotation variable to a bunch of different values. Now, one difference here from the player lineup script is initially it had like a default value. We're not doing that. Like, we're not basically resetting it every time, so that if we're not holding any of the I, J, K, L keys, but we're holding E, we'll still be holding out the shield in the last direction that it was being held in. Yeah, so that's one key difference there. So then after we've done all these calculations and gotten the rotation of which way we should be pointing the shield, then we're going down here to so if we basically have pressed this key, so we want to be shielding, but the shielding variable is false, so we weren't shielding before. Now we're then setting the shield to active, and then setting the shielding variable to true, and then setting its initial rotation to whatever button we just pressed. So whatever button, so if we were holding down IJKL and then we press the E key on the same frame, it'll activate already facing that direction. Otherwise, it'll be facing the direction it was when we were last holding the button. So then getting references to a bunch of disable booleans in the player move script, the jump script, the double jump, and the lineup script, and we're basically disabling all of these. So then we can't move, we can't jump, we can't double jump, and also the lineup arrow, that is disabled as well because we're using IJKL for the shielding and not lining up for the circle lunge slash attack thing. And then regardless of whether we regardless of this, of whether we were shielding before or not, then we're setting the shield's position to the circle's position as where we want it to be, and then setting the rotation to slowly go towards the direction that we want it to rotate towards with a not a delay, but like it smoothly goes towards it with this rotation smoothing variable. All this line is basically the exact same as how it was with the linear or with the player lineup script. Then so then here, if going back up here, if we weren't pressing the A key, or if we disabled shielding, and so if that's not true, but we shielding is true, so like we were shielding in the last frame, but now we can't, or now we aren't pressing the button, then we're disabling the shield, setting it to false, and then setting all of these variables to false as well. So basically undoing everything so we can move again and use all of our other attacks and turning off the shield. So now we have that. As well, in our circle main script, another just thing I've added as well down here is calling, when we disable the circle main script, of when we, for example, switch to the cube character, or when movement's taken away to like focus on an object or something, to like have the camera pan away, like for like mini cutscene type stuff, but still like in the middle of a level, then we're so before we just was setting the player move, like the player this player move active script to false. Now we are calling more functions to disable the arrow, to disable the shield, and then sort of undoing all these booleans here to basically make sure that if we were holding out the shield and then come in contact with something to make us pan away, then it's resetting everything so that when we pan back over to the player and they regain control, these aren't accidentally still set to true, because we don't want that. And then in our square main, actually this should have, this should probably have some of the same variables here as just a precaution. So I'm just going to copy those over there, but it won't have the circle reflect, obviously, because of just how we've, the square having different abilities and all that. So yeah, we're just the same thing here, but without the circle reflect disable shield function. Anyways, then on some of these other functions, then as we've already kind of looked at, we've just added some extra public but hidden in the inspector booleans for disabling, in this case, the double jump. And then basically where we're doing anything to do, in this case, the double jump, we're just having if disable double jump is not true, then everything else as it's been running before. But if this was true, then none of this would run to basically disable the double jump. And then the exact same case for the jump script over here, just called disable jump. And then for the player move, the exact same thing, used in basically the same context, just in slightly different places depending on where the script requires it. And with the player lineup, disable aiming. I believe this one we already kind of looked at. Yeah, so basically this is all pretty much the same. So yeah, that is basically how all of that is done. So now we have this shield block attack, which will mainly get more functionality when we actually make like some kind of projectile that like an enemy might fire at the player, or maybe having like a laser and you redirect it into something that causes a door to open or something like that. But we have most of the framework for that set up by having also this like reflect tag that when something collides with, in this case, the shield, it tests if it has a reflect tag. And then also having this no player collision layer, just so that the shield isn't colliding with the player, because otherwise it was kind of pushing the player. Yeah, so with all that in place, our sphere character and our cube character are more or less done ability-wise. There's still a few more things we need to do, like making them be able to interact with stuff like doors, levers, and all that sort of stuff. But that should be pretty easy and will be more context specific of when we actually make doors and levers and all that kind of stuff. But then we'll be allowing both characters to swim in like a body of water, and there will be some different sort of movement sets involved with that, and then hoping all the abilities don't break when we're in this water mode. But other than that, once we finished all that, then our players will be done, and we'll be finally moving on to more stuff for our level template test prototype thing here. But anyways, so that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you around.